This is wonderful.
Good to be here. Nice to see you, Deena.
Jhos, I'm so happy that you've been teaching with us here at the GTU. I'm so glad to get to learn from you tonight.
I've had a great time this semester, so thank you so much. It was really fun.
Great.
I love this community. Welcome to everybody who's coming in. If you're not already a GTU person, I hope that you check out more of the things that are going on here, because it's an amazing, really a treasure here in the Bay Area.
Thanks, Jhos. Well, since I do want to share a few introductory remarks, I'll get started with my formal greetings and such. And then we will dive into Jhos's lecture and teaching. My name is Deena Aranoff, and I'm the faculty director of the Richard S. Dinner Center for Jewish Studies here at the Graduate Theological Union. And it's been my pleasure to be here for many years. And one of my pleasures in being here was when Jhos Singer was in our master's program, and I got my first chance to really dive in to his mind, really, and heart and soul. And we were very excited when we knew that we were able to bring in an instructor this term, that Jhos agreed to teach a Jewish, what's the title of your course?
Introduction to Jewish Ritual.
Yes. And part of the thinking for this course is that some of you may know the Graduate Theological Union recently launched a chaplaincy certificate program, which means we had more and more students who were looking to explore some of the activities, the rituals that are the life of Judaism in many ways. And so bringing Jhos to teach on Jewish ritual, given his own life as a Jewish leader and ritual artist, really made the most sense. So Jhos, we're really happy to have you here tonight. And I'll just for those of you who don't know Jhos is a gifted preacher, storyteller, pastoral counselor, chef, mixologist, and musician. He skillfully translates Torah and Jewish tradition into dynamic, accessible, relevant, and compelling ideas, provocative stories, and delicious cocktails. In one hand, he holds a BA in music from UCLA and an MA in Jewish studies from here, the GTU. And in the other hand, he wields a drum, spoon, and a dictionary of Talmudic Hebrew. Jhos was ordained as a Maggid, a Jewish spiritualist, by Rabbi Gershon Winkler in 2002. He connects traditional rabbinic wisdom to our modern lives, interweaving contemporary dilemmas and problems with Judaism's ancient insights and solutions. I just want to say, one of the things that I find most striking, Jhos, about your teaching is the immediacy of it. I really find that when you are teaching or storytelling or facilitating ritual, there's such a fullness of your presence. There's nothing on the other side. There's nothing on outside of what's happening. It's just the fullness and integrated approach to Jewish culture. And so this is partially why I was very excited for your talk tonight. Just to review for everybody that's here, the talk tonight is going to, let me just get that full title, Between Storytelling and Ritual, Jewish Culture in the Making. And in this talk, Jhos is going to explore Judaism's storytelling traditions, especially as they offer a counterbalance to the fast-paced, digitally dominated aspects of modern life. So welcome, everyone. We're so happy that you're here. And Jhos, I invite you to share. Oh, and forgive me, just to everyone who's here, we do invite you to put questions in the Q&A when Jhos is done with his lecture. We will turn to the Q&A and bring your questions to him. So please do feel free to post them, and we are looking forward to the conversation after the talk.
Thank you so much, Deena. It's part of my spiritual practice to dedicate my learning. So I would like to dedicate my learning threefold. One, of each kind of dedication that I typically offer. One for healing for my son who has COVID right now. So Michael Emetzuri, Ben Yael Vayuna El Or for complete healing, and for the memory of my teacher and friend, Rachel Brody, and for the inspiration and the what I often refer to as the holy adversary who helps you sharpen your edge. And that was Deena Aranoff, was such an incredible, like, no, Jhos, you need to do that again. And really, really, no, it was a gift to be given the chance to really hone an edge. And I have benefited tremendously from your tutelage and your challenges and your guidance and your incredible enthusiasm for teaching. And this tradition, this this wild ride of a tradition. And so we're going to dive right on in, my friends, and get this show on the road. One of the things that I'm terrible at is academic anything. I am the worst. I'm a disaster, just a disaster. And but one of the books that that was assigned, I think maybe it was in your class, it was you or Nomi, I can't remember who, was this little cherry right here, Zachor by Yosef Chaim Yerushalmi. And I think I read some of these paragraphs like 90 times while I was trying to get my brain to start thinking and to learn how to dissect an idea in the academic style and academic tradition. And at about, it probably took me a week and a half to read the first 12 pages of a 100-page, reading assignment that was due 3 days later. But by page 12, in fact, it started to penetrate what he was talking about. And basically what he was saying is Judaism didn't write much of anything down for a couple thousand years. The Torah we wrote down, and then we talked and we talked and we told stories and we argued and we bickered and we laughed and we told people secrets and we dug into what those guys over there were doing and what they were doing over here, and we recorded that in something called the Talmud, but we didn't bother to check facts. We didn't bother to even try to make it historical at all. We just told the stories and duked it out. And the most loving thing in that ground foundation of this tradition, the most loving thing you can do for another person is challenge them and help them get better at thinking through their ideas and help them get stronger when they tell the story, and never settle for Dayenu. We don't do Dayenu. We talk about Dayenu. We aspire to Dayenu. It would be enough. We aspire to Dayenu, but we've never settled there, ever. Paradox, yes. Saying Dayenu really meaning no, but we want one more, but we're going to keep going. And that's part of the story of this tradition. And so I just wanted to share with you a little bit of Yerushalmi's, a couple of pithy comments that had big stars written in my highly decorated book. As you can see, most of my Post-its are still there. He talks about, he's talking about the interplay between ritual and recital. And what I'm going to say that what he means by recital is telling stories, is reciting stories. So he says, a superlative example of the interplay of ritual and recital in the service of memory. In the service of memory. What? That is just the coolest thing. Ritual and recital and storytelling is in the service of memory. This is how we remember not only what we've experienced, but more importantly, what others have experienced before us, is the ceremony of the first fruits ordained in Deuteronomy 26, where the celebrant, an ordinary Israelite, bringing his fruits to the sanctuary, must make the following declaration. And this may sound a little familiar to you as I read this quote. So here's the quote from Deuteronomy. A wandering Aramaean was my father, and he went down into Egypt and sojourned there, few in number. And he became there a nation, great, mighty, and populous. And the Egyptians dealt ill with us and afflicted us and laid upon us the hard bondage. And we cried unto the Lord, the God of our fathers, and the Lord heard our voice and saw our affliction and our toil and our oppression. And the Lord brought us forth out of Egypt with a mighty hand and with an outstretched arm and with great terribleness, with signs and with wonders. And he brought us into this place and has given us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. If you've ever been to a Passover Seder, a lot of that little story may sound very familiar to you. And it's such a concise story, very typical for Torah. Not a lot of extra, except for the terribleness. There was also probably could be translated as awesomeness, but a little bit of a few, adjectives, but mostly it's this happened, then that happened, then this happened. And then we embellish and we play with it and we pull it apart and we put it back together and we kind of fill in the gaps as our own lives have unfolded, as we have experienced oppression, as we have experienced liberation, as we have experienced our families moving from place to place. The story takes on new relevance, new valence, new energy, and importance in the way that the whole tradition unfolds. There was another, just a brief quote that Yerushalmi offers, saying, "Memory flowed above all." So he's talking about how collective memory has been preserved. Memory flowed above all through two channels, ritual and recital. And so with that as kind of our backdrop, Yerushalmi zeroes in on the Passover Seder as a place where, if you don't believe me, think about, where did you get your Jewish identity? Where did you feel that you were most involved? And for a lot of people, it's going to be Passover, because Passover doesn't rely on a rabbi or a synagogue. It doesn't rely on a talit. It doesn't rely on any of that. What it relies on is storytelling. The center, the heart and soul of the entire Seder is what we call Maggid, which means to tell, a telling. The telling is smack in the middle. And everything else is kind of there to get you there. Lots of rituals to warm you up, to start thinking, a word I learned at GTU, semiotically. Did I use that right? Semiotics, is that right? Symbolically. Pretty close. Yeah, good enough. To be thinking in symbols. To not be eating a sprig of parsley, but to be eating the freshness of the spring. To not be, putting a little salt on your food, but to be tasting sweat and tears. To not be just putting a little spice or a little zap, a little harif in your food, but to be eating the bitterness of oppression. These symbols that are made manifest through these symbolic foods that then start to cue your physical self, your body. It's asking your body to be present. It's asking your body to show up. And if I can't, I'm going to make sure that you show up. How am I going to do it? I'm going to put this stuff right in your mouth, in your taste buds, in your olfactory senses are going to explode with Manischewitz, but that's a whole other conversation. With Manischewitz and with eggs and with horseradish and with parsley and salt water and with charoset and with all of that matzah, it's going to enforce that your body is present. And from there, what we really want is to share this story. And of course, in modern American culture, it's probably one of the hardest things to do. It's one of the hardest things to do, to say, hey, does anybody know this story? And, you know, most of the time you don't get a super enthusiastic, like, yeah, I know that story, can't wait, right? You know, like, that's not typically what happens. You kind of have to pull teeth, because in our culture and more every day, we are losing our ability to tell stories. We're thinking in such short, you know, like these darts of exciting, you know, provocative information that doesn't go anywhere. It's just one adrenaline rush after the other. So I'm hoping that maybe in sharing a few stories that I think are interesting, and I would love to hear your take on them, and think about how do we first of all, there's you know, established traditional rituals like Passover Seder, high holidays, you know, or even secular holidays like, you know, barbecue at a certain time of year, you know, fireworks at the 4th of July. We've got these rituals that we do. I mean, fireworks are a ritual. They're also there to try to tell a story about something horrible, right? About a horrible, vicious war. And now we've turned it into, woohoo, you know, fireworks. It's, you know, like if there was really a strong storytelling component to the 4th of July, and we still really understood what Francis Scott Key was seeing when he wrote our national anthem, you know, if we really thought about the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there, if we were really talking about that, we would have a whole different thing. Wow, interesting, Deena. That's it. You mean for Yom Ha'atzmaut? Wow, when? So Deena, if you haven't seen it this year, Deena put in the chat that in Tel Aviv, they've stopped the fireworks on Yom Ha'atzmaut. Wow, amazing. I'm got goosebumps, and I'm also not surprised that there would be a recognition of like, whoa, what are we doing here? They know the story. They are still so close to that. They are in the story. That's an amazing symbolic move to shift that way of ritualizing that part of the story. Amazing. Can't wait to learn more about that. Thank you for popping that in there. We haven't stopped the fireworks, but we have stopped telling the story. And I think it's a big loss that we don't have a more visceral response to those things. Anyway, that's my gloss on that. There are a few things that I want to share with you, a couple of stories that that I love that come out of a few different places in the tradition. So we heard the very famous story about my father was a wandering Aramean and ended up down in Egypt, and things didn't go so well and kind of got bad. But then the Lord showed up and liberated us from the terrible conditions, and you know, we got to experience liberation, and you know, we've been grooving and moving and grooving ever since, right? So there's that little story and how it plays out in Passover. But here's a couple of stories. They don't necessarily have rituals connected to them at this point, but I think that they capture certain things about the tradition that that I think are worth like zeroing in on and talking about a little bit. And if you don't know these stories already, then I'm super excited to share them with you. This one is from Bava Metzia from the Babylonian Talmud. This is a great edition, a study edition, if you are excited about learning Talmud. This has kind of lots and lots of avenues for learning. So this is on page 85B, I think. And oh my God, I just freaking love this story. All right, so it just kind of pops out of nowhere. They're talking about learning Torah. And a teacher and his student. So the student's name is Hanina and the teacher's name is Chia, are arguing one day. Ki havu minsu Rabbi Hanina v'Rabbi Chia, Amar le Rabbi Hanina l'Rabbi Chia, Bahade Didi coming sate. So one day these two guys are arguing, Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Hanina are arguing, and Rabbi Hanina, the student, says to his teacher, "You are going to argue with me? Bahade Didi coming sate? Really? You're going to argue with me?" And then he says the most chutzpahdik thing here. He says, Chas v'shalom, Mishtachacha Torah mi Yisrael, Mahadran Allah mi Pilpuli. If Torah was forgotten by the people, I could restore it. I could return it with my pilpul, with my incisive, precise arguments, with my elucidations, with my sermons and my drashot and my interpretations. And this is just the best. The old man says, "Oh, Bahade Didi coming said, you wait, you are going to argue with me because of me? The way that what I would do would be because of what I do. Torah will never be forgotten. What do? Here's what I do. First, I get some flax seeds and I sow it and I grow it. And then I beat the flax into rope. And then I weave the rope into a net and I trap a deer in the net. And then I kill the deer and I butcher it and I give the meat to orphans. And then I tan the hides and make them into a Torah scroll. And then I go to a small place, like a faraway little village. And I find 5 kids and I teach each one of them a book of Torah. And then I find 6 more kids and I teach each one of them one of the orders of the Mishnah. And then I leave and I tell them, while I'm gone, you learn this and then you teach it to each other. That's it right there. That's it. We give the stories away. We give the story. The way this tradition stays alive, the way this tradition has any hope, the reason that Torah is not forgotten by the people is because we give it to the youngest people in the tradition. We feed them. We make the Torah. He makes the Torah himself. And then he teaches it. And then he leaves it with them and says, now you're teachers. Now you teach each other. See ya. I'm going to the next little town. I'm going to go grow some more flax. I'm going to catch some more deer, right? He's just like Johnny Appleseed of Torah, right? Incredible, incredible, beautiful distillation of why it isn't about the rabbi. It isn't about the scholar. It isn't about Rabbi Hanina, as brilliant as he was. He can elucidate, he can turn it and show us new ways to think about it. He can make incredible arguments, but he's never going to preserve it. The way you preserve it is you let it go and you give it to somebody who's got a lifetime ahead of them to live into it, to share it out, to touch other people, to share information. Oh, I didn't know that. I only know book 1. Oh, you got book 3? Wait a minute, let's find somebody who's got book 2 so that we can get from book 1 to book 3, right? This beautiful story, this agadic part of the tradition, the storytelling part of the tradition. The laws are great. The laws give us a way to create a container for culture, for sure, for peoplehood, for being distinct. But the agadot, the stories, that's where the Torah is. That's where the sacredness of the human and the divine mashed together through stories. And I love that one very, very much, because I feel like it just says so much. I mean, we could discuss it all night long. It's a good one. So that's one story that I wanted to share with you. Another one, and this is going to leap ahead in time quite a bit to the very end of the 17th century. I love this book a lot. I don't know if you know about this, the Book of Fables. Do you know that? You've seen it? So it's a translation. It's the whole story of this book is a great story in and of itself. But if you're excited about learning more about it, I encourage you to go check it out. It's a collection of Yiddish fables, which seem pretty Aesopian. Seem like a lot of them are derived from Aesop's fables and were Yiddishized and turned into these very, very Jewish storytelling style. Some of them are pretty rough and a little a lot of them wouldn't cut muster, in any kind of a publishing house today. But this one I think is still okay, and I love it a lot. So this is okay. So here's the picture. These woodcuts of a guy and an old man and his son and his donkey. So the old man wanted to go and pick wild pears, and he has this donkey, and he's like gets up on the donkey, and he's got the donkey like saddled up with empty bags so that he can fill them up with the pears. And his son is like, "Hey Dad, you want me to come with you?" And he's like, "Sure." So his son is walking alongside the donkey, and the old man's up on the donkey, and somewhere along the way they bump into a couple of people on the road, and the people on the road look and go, "What a foolish old man. Like, he's got like the young guy, he's tiring out, wherever they're going, he's going to need the young guy to be fresh. And he's up riding on the donkey. What an idiot." And the old man is like, "Oh no, gosh, he's got a point there." So he says to his son, why don't you get up on the donkey and I'll walk. And the young man says, "Okay, Dad, that sounds good. I'm happy to ride." So he gets up on the donkey, and the old man's walking alongside the donkey, and pretty soon they run into a couple more people. And those people start laughing and going, "Oh, what an idiot." They got the young guy who's hale and hearty sitting up on the donkey, and the old man is like draggling himself out, like running, trying to keep up with the donkey. A couple of idiots. And so the old man is like, "Oh, no, no, no." And he's like, "I know, we'll both ride. We'll both ride." So he gets up on the donkey, and they're riding along, and they get another couple kilometers down. Of course, they run into another pack of people who start laughing at them and going, "Oh my gosh, that poor donkey. They're going to wear that darn donkey out. Wherever they're going, whatever they're doing, that donkey's not going to make it with the two of those, schmedricks up there." And so the old man's like, oh my gosh, I don't know how we're going to do this right. And he goes, "Let's get off. I know. Let's both get off the donkey." And they're right. They're a poor donkey, and the donkey's going to need to carry all these pears back. So we want to take good care of our donkey. I know. We'll carry the donkey. So they wrestle the donkey to the ground, and they tie her feet together and turn her upside down and put her on a thing like this. You see the donkey, they've got her upside down there, and he says, "Yeah, we can do this. We got this." Just put it up on your shoulder and surely that way, when we get there, our donkey will be rested and everything will be great. And of course, the donkey is super unhappy about this situation, and they're walking along, and people are, just completely scoffing at them, and the donkey is miserable. And so here, right as they're tying the donkey up and putting it on their shoulder, the son looked at it. I've got to read this because it's so perfect. The son looked at his father and said, "Dear father, I hope you won't regret this." But just then they met some people, and they began to laugh and make fun of them. They all spoke of the marvel. They said, "Whoever heard of anything like it, to carry a donkey on a pole? See what fools they are. They do better to harness it to a cart or a carriage. It would be no disgrace if they both rode on it, instead of the donkey not being able to move tied to a pole." They both stood there at a loss, the old man and his son. And he said, "What is one to do so that people don't always mock and scorn? Therefore, I will only turn to God and care no more about the mockery of people. I will only do what seems right to me." And I just love that story, right? And the punchline is so, like, it's such a Jewish punchline of this kind of, like, of that period, particularly when spirituality was starting to blossom in a way that it had been kind of squashed down by legal elites. And here you get this story of just like, don't listen to what people are saying. And then there's a little bit of the narrator comes in with a little bit of a gloss on it and says this fable I tell in all sincerity, for one who cannot please the world, and whatever he does appears wrong, and it does not please people, for that is the custom of the world. One says it should be done in such a manner, but also another has his opinion about it. You cannot defend yourself against malicious babblers. Therefore, one should pay no attention to evil talk, for nowadays there is more of that than ever. Therefore, one should let such talk go in one ear and out the other. The end. And I think that this story is a story for right now. This story is the story of the kind of permutations people put themselves through on the internet, the kind of babblers that we pay attention to, the kind of foolishness that we respond to. I'm trying to please that one, trying to please this one, instead of just listening to your own good sense. At the end of the day, there's a pretty good idea of like, if you both need a ride, maybe you should get a cart. And maybe it would have been, yes.
Jose, I can't resist. You have Sarah Levin, who studies North African Jewish and Muslim culture and folk culture, shares a comment that the donkey tale is a classic in the Islamic world, with the fool character of Joha being the man. And this character is also prevalent in Sephardi tales. What she adds, this is the first time she's heard a Yiddish version of it with great added details. And then she remarks, these tales have no boundaries.
Beautiful. Yeah, actually, that's absolutely correct. According to the foreword of the scholar who like really hunted down the source for the collections. There's kind of a series of collections. Like I said, the story of the book itself is a story in and of itself. And Sarah, I think you would love it if you're not already familiar with this. The Book of Fables, and it is translated and edited by Eli Katz. And he does mention that this seems to be a compilation of both Aesop's tape, like a bunch of the Aesop tape fables, as well as versions of those that made it into the Islamic literature, and or stories that come out of the Islamic tradition. And of course, Joha is the the fool, the wise fool, or sometimes just the foolish fool. But there's also a compilation of those stories, the Tales of Joha, which are fantastic. And yeah, I can certainly see that this is one of those. And that leads me to another. Thank you so much for raising that. That's great. Another. This is one of my all-time favorites, especially anybody who is trying to introduce their kids to Jewish stories. So the Jewish Nachash, the Trickster Coyote, Anasi character is somebody called Herschel of Ostropol, who is another one of those characters in the folklore about whom many stories are told. And this is like I said, like stories have their own evolutions, and the beauty, what Rabbi Chia understood is, I'm going to go teach it to that kid, and he's going to, or she's going to teach it to their neighbor. And it's going to be different than the way that I would teach it. It's going to come out a little different. Beauty of Torah is, of course, that the actual words are set in ink. They were originally set in stone, but we lost those. So they're set in ink now, but they change. That's why we read it in a cycle. Every year we come back to the same story. They change. Why? Because we change. They change. Why? Because the world changes. And the parts that we find that are central, that are that neshama, that's that core part of our soul that is essential, that never changes. We read that story and it hits us the same way every time. That's your Torah. The parts that are slithering around all of that center is your story. You've got your Torah, and then you've got your story. And these stories that come, diverging and descending out of the Torahitic essence, hold so much. This one is another one of my favorites. You should really read. This is by Steve Sheinkin. You should really read it the way he tells it. I'm going to do a little bit more of a glossed version of it, but he's very funny. And what he's done is it's a graphic novel of Jewish wisdom and wit in the Wild West. So he's set a bunch of these folk tales in a small town during like the gold rush times in Colorado. I think that he's got him set in Elk Spring, Colorado. High in the Rocky Mountains, there lived a man named Nathan. He was a candle maker, but what he really loved to do was read. And he would have sat and read for a living, but no one would pay him to do it. So he worked all day, and then he read at night by the light of his candles. And one day his candle shop burns down, and he's like, oh no, what am I going to do? And his wife says, you're a pretty smart guy. Maybe it says like this: they didn't have enough money to rebuild. So Nathan went into town to look for work, but there was no jobs for a man with his skills. And he's blathering on with the baker about ancient Rome. And finally it's like, dude, why don't you go talk to the rabbi about what you should do? So he goes to the rabbi, and the rabbi says, I don't know anything about candles. And he goes, yeah, I know, but I can't rebuild the candle shop anyway. So I don't know what to do. And he starts naming, he demonstrates that he's got some Torah. And the rabbi says, I think you should go teach children. So we're having another version of the importance of teaching children. So you should go to the next couple of towns down and teach children over in Utah. And you can send money back. And then when you've earned enough money, you can come back. So he says, okay. And he goes and he's teaching the kids in Utah, and he lives in a small little shack, and day by day he earns a little bit more, and he gets his first sack of gold for the first half of the year that he's taught. 100 silver dollars as promised. And he thanks the principal, and then he's like, I need somebody to take this money to my wife and kids. And he meets a merchant, and he thinks maybe this merchant is going to Elk Springs. So he says, which direction are you going, sir? And the merchant says, oh, I'm heading to Colorado. And he says, are you going through Elk Springs? He goes, yeah, I was planning on it. And he says, I need a favor. I need a courier. The guy says, okay, what do you need me to take and how much you pay me? And he says, well, that's the thing. I need you to take this bag of money. And I'll tell you what. And by this time he smells a rat. He's like, I don't know, I think this guy is not quite reputable. So he thinks really quick, and he goes, I'll tell you what, you take this bag of money to my wife, Ruth, and you can give her what you want. He says, how much is in the bag? He says, 100 silver dollars. He says, and I can give her what I want. And Rabbi Harvey says, Nathan says, yeah, I'll tell you what, I'm going to write it down for you. And he writes a note, and the note says, find the note. The note says, wait, where's the note? It says, I'm going to write a note to my wife, and it'll explain our agreement. Dear Ruth, this kind merchant has agreed to take my money to you. As his payment for his effort, he will give you as much of the money as he wants. Love, Nathan. P.S. Hello, kids. So this guy is like, what a chump, like, I am so good with this. So he goes, and he actually goes to Colorado Springs, or to Elk Springs in Colorado, and he finds Ruth, and he says, boy, did you marry an idiot. I'm bringing you the money that he just earned, and he told me I could give you what I want. So here's $1. And Ruth is like, he told you what? And he says, no, really, he wrote it down. Look, and he gives her the note that says, dear Ruth, this guy was nice enough to take the money to you, and I told him he can give you what he wants. And she reads it a few times, and she's like, that idiot. He's not an idiot. What's going on here? She says, wait a minute, sir. We got to get Rabbi Harvey over here. So they go, she's like, I don't accept this. And he's like, okay, go to the rabbi. I got, it's written down. So they go to the rabbi, and he shows it to Rabbi Harvey, and Rabbi Harvey is like, ooh, well, that's kind of, what's going on with this? Let's see, what could this mean? And then he gets it. And he looks at the merchant, and he says, so, sir, your understanding is that you can give Ruth what you want. Is that correct? And he says, that's what the note says. And he says, great. What if this do you want? And the guy goes, I want $99. That's what I want. And he goes, oh, great. Well, then that's what you have to give Ruth, because the note clearly says that you have to give her what you want. If you want $99, that's what you give her. Here's your dollar. Thank you very much. Adios. Right? It's a classic Herschel of Osterpol story. It's also a classic rabbinic move to hyper read the text and read it so literally that it means exactly the opposite of what it means. And this hyper literal reading, or this very interpretive reading, this is what we find in Jewish rituals everywhere. I think you could do you could develop an amazing ritual out of this updated Herschel of Osterpol story if you wanted to. So I love that one. I love the fables. I love the Chia. I love the idea of giving Torah to each other. And I love the idea that the basis of all of this is to bring us together, to discuss, to learn with each other, and to deepen our understanding of not just the Torah, but most importantly, of ourselves, who we are, and how we present and how we hold this tradition or any tradition in the world. So it looks like there's some activity over in the chat. Wanted to turn to Q&A if there's some questions or that anybody has, or comments. I'm always excited about comments too.
Wow, thank you, Jose. Wow. Yeah, in the chat, you're getting a lot of gratitudes and appreciations for these stories and the breadth of the stories, taking us from the Deuteronomy in Zachor into Bava Metzia, into a Yiddish collection, and up to a contemporary graphic novel.
A Yiddish collection with a Islamic backstory, so a little bit of cross culture.
Yes. So, well, if I could just dive in with a question, which is, do you think that the binding of Isaac is at all kind of providing an intertext for that folktale? I mean, a father with his young son and a saddled animal walking along, and what do you think about that?
Oh, I love that's a good that we could rush on that all night. I think it's great. Yeah, I mean, we do have, I mean, this, of course, this story is quite comical. And in a way, I would say that it kind of turns the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, on its head, which is, you're going to do this crazy thing? Like, you really? I mean, that's like the punchline is like, don't listen to people who are telling you things that you know are patently wrong. Right. So the one could make an argument, I think, that it is kind of like, you know, like flagging its nose at that idea of you know, just because you said so doesn't mean I shouldn't argue with you or say like, well, that's very nice, but I don't think so. Right. Of course, that story, the Akedah, is so problematic and powerful. And, you know, it's a whew, right? It's a classic, you know, it's a suspense story, and, you know, and it has a at least a what do you call that when it's, you know, you've been reprieved at the end. But it also, it speaks to trauma. And I think that this story also speaks to trauma, right? I mean, where are they going? Are they clearly Jews? Are they being mocked by people who are not Jews? Is it just, you know, is it where's, is there anti-Semitic or even inter you know, sinat chinam? Is it inter violence that is being visited upon these two? And then it's not till the end, it's like, you know, you could have had a cart. You know, it's like not till the end of the Akedah, it's like, oh, yo, grab a goat, you know, grab a ram out of the thicket there. But I love that you heard the resonance in there with the binding and the animal and the father and son. It's, yeah, I love that.
Thanks. May I ask another question? You started out talking about Pesach and the Seder and its formative role for people, with an emphasis on Maggid, the storytelling, as the kind of like the beating heart of the evening, and the ritual as kind of like preparation for readying the person in an embodied sense for the activity of storytelling. You know, as you know, Jose, I really care a lot about Jewish culture and household life and its formative role in the kind of like the inscription of Jewishness on anyone in the whole ambiance. Could it be argued that the storytelling is not the centerpiece, that the sensory experiences that you just outlined, I mean, by the time you were done with the parsley and the salt water, I was like, bring it on. Who's to say what is the center, as it were, of the evening?
Great question. I think my experience of just studying the ritual is that things clip along. And then you enter the Maggid, and it's like, that's where you get all of you get the 4 kids, you get the 4 questions, you get my father was a wandering Aramaic, you get Aramaean, you get all of this additional material, even, before you get to like, okay, well, we tell the story of Moses already, for crying out loud, and these 4 children, blah, blah. It's obvious to me that it evolved out of a storytelling tradition, to be like, well, yeah, but wait, I got one more for you, like, what about this, or what about, right? There's like, it's such a lot of kind of banter, whereas up until then, you've got Kadesh Urchatz Karpas Yachatz, you're like, bless it, you eat it. Maybe there's a little extra longer for the Kiddush, or a little extra longer for this, that, or the other thing, but basically it's like chick chuck, like get you there. Is my experience of just like looking at a very traditional a Haggadah. It kind of moves pretty quickly until you get to all of that robust, conversational, provocative, and the rabbis arguing late into the night, and that long, unbelievable story about who is it? The rabbi sitting around, and who is it? I can't remember.
I don't know which story.
It's in that whole big middle section of like the guys sitting around and yammering all night, and they're having this big, big conversation. And then you get a long story. That whole Moses story is long, and just in terms of real estate, like hourly, like by minute, it takes up a lot of the minutes. And yet I think it's probably, at this stage of the game, for a lot of people, it's probably the most uncomfortable part, and in many ways the least memorable. So I do think that the sensory part is the most memorable, and I think intentionally so. Like, if you don't remember a single song, a single story, you are going to remember the flavor of that parsley. You are going to remember the flavor or the burn of that, or the hilarity of your nose exploding with the horseradish, or the harifa, or whatever it is that you use to have that come alive in your body. Yeah. So I think that in terms of like the practicalities of it, I think that those symbols are tremendously important.
Great. And we have a nice comment in the chat.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think that, it's a rich, it is an incredibly rich, I mean, from as an educator, you look at that Seder and you go, this is genius. It appeals to every kind of learner, right? It appeals to those who are auditory, who are visual, who, right? Hold it up, hide it, have the Seder play with all the colors and the things. And there's, visual components, sensory, the whole, corpus of kind of educational models, you could argue are embedded in this ritual that is, hundreds, if not close to 1,000 years old as we know it now. Right? It's pretty amazing.
Yes. And do you see, given that you are also someone who innovates ritual, do you see, is it possible still today to innovate ritual that has, just to use the Yerushalmi language that you began with, memory flowing between these two channels of ritual and recital? Maybe this will be a last question for you, Jhos, on this contemporary question of ritual making.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly if we're going to, focus on Pesach, you betcha. Orange on the Seder plate, olive on the Seder plate. That poor Seder plate's getting pretty full, right? Because it's like, look at everything that's happened. Look at how much more needs to be talked about in terms of liberation. It still sticks with the basic theme, which is, there was oppression, there was liberation, and then there's redemption. And those three are such ginormous buckets And how do we keep playing with those ideas in a world that is increasingly free and increasingly oppressed, right? Like that we're sitting in this place where some of us have so much freedom and some of us are so oppressed, and that story is still so live. And where will our redemption come, right? It's not enough to be liberated. You actually have to be redeemed, right? You have to have purpose. You have to have your life be about making meaning, about something more than just I can do whatever I want now, right? There's a profound conversation to be had, and as we get more and more powerful, more and more dangerous, we have more and more to talk about. So I think that it's essential that we continue that conversation through these rituals and by innovating our symbols and our pathway. Yeah.
Thank you, Jose, for this. I secretly wishing that my kids were listening in, because the stories that you provided, they were stirring on many levels. Maybe I'll just pull out the word pilpul that was in your Talmudic story. The profound playfulness of suggesting that pilpul, which is a slightly derogatory term. It means, my back and forth, my speculative, schmoozy, conversational, speculative discourse will be the stuff of Torah remembered.
Right.
Thank you, Jose, for sharing that with us.
You're so welcome, Deena. It's always, just like I said, it's a pleasure to be engaged with this community. So thank you, and thank you for everything you do to keep the the Center for Jewish Studies and the Dinner Center at GTU alive and thriving, and more Torah, more Torah, more Torah.
Amen. Thank you, Jose. Thank you to those of you who joined. And this session is recorded, so it'll be available on our GTU YouTube. You can find it. And thank you for joining us.
Thanks, y'all.
Good night.
Blessings.